Welcome back to Microsft Flight Simulator, and welcome to the Milviz Cessna 310R Romeo. Just to get the elephant in the room out of the way, I'm in developer mode because I've just switched from a 1070 card to a 3070. So I'm currently just reviewing frame rates and seeing where I have a problem with that, which is main thread limited at the moment. Certainly a big difference between going from a 1070 to a 3070, as you might expect. So, okay, let's get to the Milviz. This is really kind of a first look video. I mean, literally, this is the first time that I actually powered the thing up. This is going to be a simple circuit. I'm incredibly rusty. I haven't actually flown for 3 months, so bear that in mind. And I'm also figuring out the aircraft. Okay, so I feel it's an unfortunate time for release for the Milviz, because obviously you have the PMDG, you have the Phoenix, so I think maybe it's gotten a little bit lost in the mix there. This is about as close as you're going to get to an A2A aircraft until A2A release their aircraft. What I mean by that is that, yes, it has persistent switches, which, you know, most aircraft do have persistent switches now. It's pretty much well, I would say it's a standard feature, but I don't think Coronado have caught up with that just yet. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't bought a Coronado aircraft for a while. But also it has persistent wear and tear, and what that means is things are going to fail over time. When you first start the aircraft, it will associate a state to that tail number, so Golf November Oscar Victor Alpha. That's a specific aircraft, and what that means is wear and tear will build up over time on that particular aircraft. What that means ultimately is that you do have to do your tests. Things will fail. Okay, if you go for the standard setup, which will be that you own the aircraft and that failures happen rarely, then that's really like owning the aircraft, right, without having to pay the bills for it. You can also go with leased aircraft, so the switches will be in random positions depending on how the previous person shut the aircraft down. But in ownership, when you have ownership of that aircraft, it will always, and here we have the typical bug of traffic on the taxiway, but the aircraft will always be as you left it if you select ownership. Rarely for failures means that you have realistic failures, so things will go wrong. It really is important to monitor your aircraft. When I initially set this aircraft up, it came with worn spark plugs on the left engine. That's something that I need to pay attention to. So it's important when you're in the sky, absolutely, to check your T's and P's, alright? You've got to keep monitoring your temperatures and your pressures. But it also means that it's important to do your run-ups. I do a run-up in this aircraft, but I don't know at the time of recording how to check the magnetos, so that's something that I need to look up. And here we have a bus again on the taxi. So it's one of these bugs that you just wish Asobo would fix. The workaround, I suppose, would be to reduce airport activity in settings, but that's kind of, I don't like doing that. We shouldn't have to do it, but until Asobo fix that, then, you know, obviously it's going to be a recurring issue. So what that means in the end is that you have pretty much a living, breathing aircraft, and I find that is going to encourage me to fly the aircraft more than, for example, a Coronado. A Coronado, you know, it's just going to be what it is. Every time you take it up, there's going to be no difference in the aircraft. Whereas this, you always have to bear in mind that things can fail, that things are failing. If you abuse the aircraft, for example, if you indulge in heavy braking, you're going to have issues around the wheels and maybe the brakes as well. So it just comes to life in a way that standard aircraft, you're not gonna get that same feeling. far as the aesthetics are concerned, the instrument panel, I don't know, some of the instruments look a little bit 2D, look a little bit flat, as you can see there. Some of them look better than others. I think maybe it's just a stylistic thing and I'll get used to it at some point, but it's yeah, it kind of looks like, it strikes you when you get in the aircraft, if you're used to other styles, if you will. You've got a fair choice of avionics. I'll just stick with the Garmin 530s and the 430 actually, because that's what I'm used to. I think it's the 750. I don't know, I've very rarely used that. I'm not really, I don't know, there's something about it just looks a little bit console-ish, kind of, or phone. It's like, I don't know, it just feels weird to me. Maybe it's just that I'm used to the Garmin 430 and 530s. But you've got flexibility, you can use whatever you like. So, I'm already, what, 6 minutes in, but I'll do the TLDR. This is a great aircraft. It has all those features that I've talked about, the persistent switches, the persistent states. It also flies really well, it taxis really well. It's got a sense of weight about it, which, you know, a lot of times in simulation you get, whether it's a plane or a car, there isn't a feeling of weight to it. It's almost like it's floating. But this has a really good weight to it. It flies really well. It's docile on the ground and in the air. It does what you want it to do. Okay, so I've kind of guessed here that I've not really put a huge amount of preparation into this flight, so I've guessed that it's runway 27, which, you know, is usually a good guess. Looking at, I've got Rex weather running, which was showing winds about 14 knots around this part of the world, so not sure what the crosswind is. Max crosswind component for this aircraft is 19 knots, so we're safely within that. You might see an effect of crosswind when I take off. It just gets a little bit erratic when I take off. And also on approach and landing, I think there's a little bit of a crosswind from the right. Just going to stop it here and do the run-ups. Still figuring out where everything is on the aircraft. Took me quite a while to figure out that that's the landing gear handle, with that matte black kind of finish. Obviously you've got the mixtures down to lean the engine. I actually forget to push the mixture levers full forward on takeoff, which is just a complete beginner error, but that's something I have to get into my head every time. Also, I forget to push the prop levers forward coming around to land, but that's another story. We're getting ahead of ourselves here. So it's a little bit different, the layout's a little bit different from, say, a Cessna 172 or a 152. One criticism I'd have maybe is the hot spots for the switches are a little bit on the small side. I find it hard to hit them at times, as you'll see in the video. So just pushing the RPMs up to 1700. One thing that was really nice to see, if you look at the amp meter selector, I'm just checking the alternators here, looking at voltage. With a battery, previously it was drawing power, but it was nice to see that going down to 0. What that means is it's charged. And in flight, I think you want to leave that on battery, because if you're drawing power in the air from the battery, it means there's something wrong with the alternators. Okay, just checking everything's in the green, which it is. Again, it's something you've got to monitor, you've got to keep on top of in a flight. It's not so easy when you're when you find a circuit, so obviously you've kind of got your hands full. Just a word on specs. I have a 6700K processor and a 3070. It's a gigabyte gaming OC 3070, so that gives you an idea. And most of my settings are high with some at ultra. See, I'm trying to check the magnetors by turning them off, which was a bad idea. And I'm restarting the engine. Finally figure out after a while that you've got to set the primer to right. Takes me a while to figure it out. There you go. Primer to right and restart the right engine. Actually, I'm using throttle, prop and mixture on one axis each. So when I started the aircraft, power 1 inch forward, start the engine, push forward to, I think it's 1000 RPM. Then when I tried to start the right engine, it wouldn't do it, so I had to pull the power back again. So it's nice to see that touch there. Trying to test the props, but I'm not sure about the procedure for this aircraft, so struggling a little bit. That's stuff to look up, and I will get that right when I properly fly the aircraft. Also the sound, it sounds, bringing the mixtures back, the props just sound really nice. I mean, just listen to that. So the props sound really nice. The audio in general is fine. There's no issues whatsoever with that. Testing controls. I mean, it just sounds really nice. Overall, it has a really nice feel. Even that, I think it's like a hand crank between the seats. I think that raises the pilot seat, I'm not sure. I wish the hotspot for that little window was in the original place. I don't like having a hunt for the hotspots on these things. There is a small issue with the, what would you call EFB, the little iPad thing on the left. You're not seeing it right now, it'll pop up later. That's where you actually interact with everything, which reminds me of something else actually. But sometimes you're clicking the tablet near the or over the top of the left column, and it will turn that off, which is a bit of a pain. One other thing I'd mention before we go any further, this tracks passenger comfort, and what that means in actuality is that you actually have to deal with the heat and the temperature controls in the cockpit. You have to deal with that to keep the passengers happy. I mean, obviously you can ignore it if you choose, but it gives them a purpose. You know, a lot of the time, if there's no real purpose to doing something, you just don't do it. It's like the run-up. You won't do an engine run-up. You might do it once or twice, but there comes a point where it's like, yeah, I just don't want to do that, because there's no purpose to doing it. Now you have to do a run-up, right? I mean, you don't want to take off and find you've got a catastrophic system failure that you could have figured out if you'd done the run-up on the ground. It's the same with the temperature controls. I think once you put those in a spot that's good, then you can leave them where they are, but it's good that these things actually serve a purpose and they're not just there. You don't just role play them. Okay, just trying to remember everything I need to do here. And this is the one aircraft where I will probably have to include emergency procedures in my personal checklist, because sooner or later something's going to go wrong. Even the circuit breakers work. The landing light's interesting. It's a kind of unusual landing light. I don't quite fully use them properly in this flight because I struggle to get the hotspot after I touch down. Anyway, here I'm just struggling to get the heading bug because I have it mapped to a switch, but I can't remember which switch it is, so I'm just going through switches for a while there. Setting the heading bug to runway heading, just flying a basic circuit. on takeoff I was applying a little bit of back pressure at 80 knots and then taking off at 92. Didn't quite work out as planned, but see, I struggle to hit the hot spots sometimes or stay on them. They just seem quite small. And there it is. See the landing lights there, extended from the end of the wings, or the lower part of the end of the wings, if you know what I'm saying. See, I completely forget to push the mixtures forward. We take off, but obviously that's not a smart thing to do at this altitude. We don't need to be leaning mixture here. Okay, just going over some final details, just checking everything. So as we take off, just a little bit of a, I think it's a little bit of a twitch to the left, which may be a crosswind. And yeah, just checking the speed indications. And powering up. As always, just trying to keep it centre line as much as possible. There's the windsock, so it's kind of a moderate crosswind. Looks more like left to right, to be honest. Well, yeah, on landing then it would be right to left, wouldn't it? See, it's a little bit, kind of went off a little bit. A little bit dark. I could have probably turned the lighting, the cockpit lighting up a little bit, which of course is an option. And about 600 feet we're looking for a 25 square power setting. Just backing off on the power and backing off on the prop. Takes a little bit of time on my throttle quadrant because the upper range is a bit dodgy, but that's another story. As you can see, we're looking at what, 55 FPS, and now 1100, just settling it back down again. It sticks at altitude quite well. It's not all that erratic. Obviously I'm descending a little bit at the moment, but it's nice and controllable. Sticks quite well at that 20-degree bank. As usual with the circuit, we're putting the heading bug at the 3 o'clock position. Check, there you go, there's the runway. We're at Liverpool, Echo Golf, Golf Papa. I forget the developer, but it might be Orbex, or it might be third party through Orbex, but it's a really good airport. Has some interesting restrictions on departures. So yeah, as you see, we've not really, there's been a little bit of variation in the vertical speed, but it's kind of sticking quite nicely around 1100. Very controllable, so at what, 130? Normal flight, I think you're looking between 115 and 130 knots, I believe. Yeah, get my gummits check a little bit short here. I should have pushed the props forward. I mean, I could make the excuse of noise abatement procedures and all that kind of thing, but I just forgot to push the props forward. That's what happens when you haven't flown for 3 months. So we're just looking to be parallel with the runway threshold. It's really good to see the frames holding up regardless Obviously it's not over central London or anything like that, but it's still pretty good. Okay, so we fly past the threshold. We're looking for that for the threshold to be at about a 45-degree angle from the wing root. A lot of this is about figuring out what power settings you need to use for each particular phase. So it's kind of useful to record it, even if you're doing your own circuits. It's useful to record it and look back and just see what power settings that you're using, so you've got a reference point. I know some of the landscapes seem a little bit weird in southern England. You've got these kind of weird kind of terrain effects. I don't know what that's about. Okay, back in that, we started at 500 feet per minute descent. Really nice and easy to get into that. Starting to come down. I want to be about, I think, 600 feet rolling out. On final, I think, as memory serves. Approach speed is about 92 knots. I'm way quicker than I should be. Don't bleed off enough speed. I get it about right late on. But again, completely rusty. Turned in a little bit earlier than I should have done, but I would always rather turn in earlier rather than late. So I need to tighten this up a little bit. Again, it's judgment. See, the speed's quite a bit too quick. It's about 120. Flaps going to 35 degrees doesn't result in a huge bump, which makes it more manageable. And of course we have 3 reds, so we're a little bit too low, but height is never really a problem in this landing. I'm just a little bit off centre, and I don't flare quite as well as I should have done. I should have held the nose wheel up better than I did. I've seen comment where people are saying, well, you know, when you go through the round out and flare, it tends to drop out of the sky onto the runway. That's how the real aircraft works. You don't chop the throttle on the round out, just back off the power through the round out, and then when you're flaring, maybe back it off a little bit more during the flare and hold it off. But I don't kill, you'll see in this, I don't chop the throttle at any point until we're actually on the ground. So I fly it onto the ground, a little bit left of centre, backing off the power, holding it. Should have held the nose up a little bit more. You can hear the wheel tip, the nose will touch down there, and then just kind of letting it roll. Don't raise the flaps at this point, because they're helping slow the aircraft down. All that drag. I make the decision to turn off a little bit late, because I realised that it's a pretty easy angle here, and I just don't have enough rudder to really make this look neat and tidy. It's a little bit ugly, but it works. And now we're looking for the hold short to clean the aircraft up. So yeah, I don't have many negatives to say about this aircraft, other than the hot spots for switches, but I think that's a general issue. I just wish the hot spots were a little bit larger on some of these, certainly these switches down the left hand side. Can't really fault it. I just I feel for Milviz that they've put it out at the same time as I said before. You have the PMDG and you have the Phoenix. It's a tough marketplace at the moment, but I do think this really stands out. As always, do your research into it, but if you are into GA aircraft, this is, you know, kind of A2A like, and certainly if you're looking for a twin prop, I would hands down recommend this one. I mean, for heaven's sake, you even get dirt on the outside of the aircraft which you need to clean periodically. It is just a great looking aircraft. It handles really well, it's really docile. I've not done a complete flight, as I said before. This is my actual genuine first look at the aircraft, and just I couldn't be more happy with it. It's quite expensive at £40 GBP as opposed to the 50 for the Phoenix A320. Depends on what you're looking for. If you're really interested in jets, and you should probably go for the Phoenix or the PMDG, but if you are into GAs, this is just absolute easy purchase. It is just, in my opinion, from what I've seen at least, the best GA aircraft on MSFS at this time, and maybe for quite a while to come. So I just aimed at this guy. I'm not really parking it properly, I'm just aiming it at that guy and shutting down, obviously preparing for the next flight when I want all the switches to be in the correct positions. So I hope you enjoyed that mini flight in the Milviz Cessna 310 Romeo. Hope you find it useful, and hope if you do get the aircraft that you enjoy it as much as I've enjoyed it so far. And there's a bug with the logbook not recording. So as always, feel free to like, comment and subscribe.